This clown called you by name, Jeff Reeves said in a totally expressionless voice. He looked over Haggerty's bent head at Harold Gardner, and one eye drew down in a wink. Yes, Haggerty said, not looking up. I know how it sounds. 13. So then you threw him over, Boudelier said. Bum's rush. Not me, Unwin said, looking up. He flicked the hair out of his eyes with one hand and stared at them urgently. When I saw they really meant to do it, I tried to pull Steve away because I knew the guy might get banged up. It was like 10 feet to the water. It was 23. One of Chief Rademacher's patrolmen had already measured. But it was like he was crazy. The two of them kept yelling, Bum's rush, and they picked him up. Webby had him under the arms, and Steve had him by the seat of the pants, and 14. When Haggerty saw what they were doing, he rushed back toward them, screaming, No, 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 at the top of his voice. Chris Unwin pushed him backward, and Haggerty landed in a teeth-rattling heap on the sidewalk. Do you want to go over too? He whispered. You run, baby. They threw Adrian Mellon over the bridge and into the water then. Haggerty heard the splash. Let's get out of here, Steve Dubé said. He and Webby were backing toward the car. Chris Unwin went to the railing and looked over. He saw Haggerty first, sliding and clawing his way down the weedy, trash-littered embankment to the water. Then he saw the clown. The clown was dragging Adrian out on the far side with one arm. Its balloons were in its other hand. Adrian was dripping wet, choking, moaning. The clown twisted its head and grinned up at Chris. Chris said he saw its shining silver eyes and its bared teeth. Great big teeth, he said. Like the lion in the circus, man, he said. I mean, they were that big. Then he said he saw the clown shove one of Adrian Mellon's arms back so it lay over his head. Then what, Chris? Boudelier said. He was bored with this part. Fairy tales had bored him since the age of 8 on. I don't know, Chris said. That was when Steve grabbed me and hauled me into the car. But I think it bit into his armpit. He looked up at them again, uncertain now. I think that's what it did. Bit into his armpit. Like it wanted to eat him, man. Like it wanted to eat his heart. 15. No, Haggerty said when he was presented with Chris Unwin's story in the form of questions. The clown did not drag Aid up on the far bank, at least not that he saw. And he would grant that he had been something less than a disinterested observer by that point. By that point, he had been out of his fucking mind. The clown, he said, was standing near the far bank with Adrian's dripping body clutched in its arms. Aid's right arm was stuck stiffly out behind the clown's head, and the clown's face was indeed in Aid's right armpit. But it was not biting. It was smiling. Haggerty could see it looking out from beneath Aid's arm and smiling. The clown's arms tightened, and Haggerty heard ribs splinter. Aid shrieked. Float with us, Don, the clown said out of its grinning red mouth, and then pointed with one of its white-gloved hands under the bridge. Balloons floated against the underside of the bridge. Not a dozen or a dozen dozens, but thousands, red and blue and green and yellow. And printed on the side of each was, I love dairy. 16. Well, now that surely does sound like a lot of balloons, Reeves said, and tipped Harold Gardner another wink. I know how it sounds, Haggerty reiterated in the same dreary voice. You saw those balloons, Gardner said. Don Haggerty slowly held his hands up in front of his face. I saw them as clearly as I can see my own fingers at this moment. Thousands of them. You couldn't even see the underside of the bridge. There were too many of them. They were rippling a little and sort of bouncing up and down. There was a sound, a funny low squealing noise. That was their sides rubbing together. And strings. There was a forest of white strings hanging down. They looked like white strands of spiderweb. The clown took Aid under there. I could see its suit brushing through those strings. Aid was making awful choking sounds. I started after him, and the clown looked back. I saw its eyes, and all at once I understood who it was. Who was it, Don? Harold Gardner asked softly. It was Derry, Don Haggerty said. It was this town. And what did you do then? It was Reeves. I ran, you dumb shit, Haggerty said, and burst into tears. 17. Harold Gardner kept his peace until November 13th, the day before John Garton and Stephen Dubé were to go on trial in Derry District Court for the murder of Adrian Mellon. Then he went to see Tom Boudelier. He wanted to talk about the clown. Boudelier didn't, but when he saw Gardner might do something stupid without a little guidance, he did. There was no clown, Harold. The only clowns out that night were those 3 kids. You know that as well as I do. We have 2 witnesses. Oh, that's crap. Unwin decided to bring on the one-armed man, as in, we didn't kill the poor little faggot, it was the one-armed man, as soon as he understood he'd really gotten his buns into some hot water this time. Haggerty was hysterical. He stood by and watched those kids murder his best friend. It wouldn't have surprised me if he'd seen flying saucers. But Boudelier knew better. Gardner could see it in his eyes, and the assistant DA's ducking and dodging irritated him. Come on, he said. We're talking about independent witnesses here. Don't bullshit me. Oh, you want to talk bullshit? Are you telling me you believe there was a vampire clown under the Main Street Bridge? Because that's my idea of bullshit. No, not exactly, but... Or that Haggerty saw a billion balloons under there, each imprinted with exactly the same thing as what was written on his lover's hat? Because that is also my idea of bullshit. No, but... Then why are you bothering with this? Stop cross-examining me, Gardner roared. They both described it the same, and neither knew what the other one was saying. Boudelier had been sitting at his desk playing with a pencil. Now he put the pencil down, got up, and walked over to Harold Gardner. Boudelier was 5 inches shorter, but Gardner retreated a step before the man's anger. Do you want us to lose this case, Harold? No, of course not. Do you want those running sores to walk free? No. Okay, good. Since we both agree on the basics, I'll tell you exactly what I think. Yes, there was probably a man under the bridge that night. Maybe he was even wearing a clown suit, although I've dealt with enough witnesses to guess maybe it was just a stew bum or a transient wearing a bunch of cast-off clothes. I think he was probably down there scrounging for dropped change or road meat, half a burger someone chucked over the side, or maybe the crumbs from the bottom of a Frito bag. Their eyes did the rest, Harold. Now, is that possible? I don't know, Harold said. He wanted to be convinced, but given the exact tally of the 2 descriptions, no. He didn't think it was possible. Here's the bottom line. I don't care if it was Kinko the Clown, or a guy in an Uncle Sam's suit on stilts, or Hubert the Happy Homo. If we introduce this fellow into the case, their lawyer is going to be on it before you can say Jack Robinson. He's going to say those 2 little innocent lambs out there with their fresh haircuts and new suits didn't do anything but toss that gay fellow Mellon over the side of the bridge for a joke. He'll point out that Mellon was still alive after he took the fall. They have Haggerty's testimony as well as Unwin's for that. His clients didn't commit murder. Oh, no. It was a psycho in a clown suit. If we introduce this, that's going to happen, and you know it. Unwin's going to tell that story anyhow. But Haggerty isn't, Boudelier said, because he understands. Without Haggerty, who's going to believe Unwin? Well, there's us, Harold Gardner said with a bitterness that surprised even himself. But I guess we're not telling. Oh, give me a break, Boudelier roared, throwing up his hands. They killed him. They didn't just throw him over the side. Garton had a switchblade. Mellon was stabbed 7 times, including once in the left lung and twice in the testicles. The wounds matched the blade. 4 of his ribs were broken. Dubé did that, bear-hugging him. He was bitten all right. There were bites on his arms, his left cheek, his neck. I think that was Unwin and Garton, although we've only got one clear match, and that one's probably not clear enough to stand up in court. And so, all right, there was a big chunk of meat gone from his right armpit. So what? One of them really liked to bite. Probably even got himself a pretty good bone on while he was doing it. I'm betting Garton, although we'll never prove it. And Mellon's earlobe was gone. Boudelier stopped, glaring at Harold. If we let in this clown story, we'll never bring it home to them. Do you want that? No, I told you. The guy was a fruit, but he wasn't hurting anyone, Boodle-Ear said. So hi-ho the Dario, along come these three pussholes in their engineer boots and they steal his life. I'm going to put them in a slam, my friend, and if I hear they get their puckery little assholes cored down there at Thomaston, I'm going to send them cards saying, I hope whoever did it had AIDS. Very fiery, Gardner thought. And the convictions will also look very good on your record when you run for the top spot in 2 years. But he left without saying more, because he also wanted to see them put away. 18. John Weber Garton was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in Thomaston State Prison. Stephen Bischoff Dubé was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in Shawshank State Prison. Christopher Philip Unwin was tried separately as a juvenile and convicted of second-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 6 months at the South Wyndham Boys Training Facility, sentence suspended.